Good evening, ladies and jelly babies, and welcome to another episode of my Quantum Computer Rotor podcast. My name is Dr. Alexis Kirke, and I'm an alcoholic, but of course, I'm not. In this episode, which I have titled Simulating How Thanos Won the Endgame, we will be covering a number of items. In particular, we'll be proving that Thanos indeed did win the Endgame in the Avengers film that was recently released, and using this to show how a quantum computer can simulate and even participate in multiple universes, and use this as a way of explaining the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. I'm going to start the IBM Q14 Melbourne running. I will explain the process that is happening a little later, but you will hear in the background every so often an IBM triggered announcement, I shall say. And this announcement is going to show that Thanos did win the Endgame. I think it should prove conclusively that Thanos did win the Endgame. I should just cover a couple of points that people keep on asking me about. Why am I Dr. Alexis Kirke rather than Alexis Kirke or Dr. Alexis Kirke? The reason is simple.
I am inevitable.
No, it's not because I am inevitable. I'll explain that little interruption in a moment. It is because I have done 2 PhDs, one in a Faculty of Science and Technology and one in a Faculty of Arts. Hence, I've decided to take the title Doctor, because no one told me I couldn't. I wasn't able, however, to...
I am inevitable.
to put it on my credit card. This could actually get a little bit annoying if Thanos is going to keep on doing this. Okay, let's get on. We will start with one other explanation, which is I've been asked what is the strange underlying drone that goes through much of the podcast. This is another sonification piece of music that I did that was
Iron Man.
Well, jolly good. Here we hear Tony Stark actually winning, so good for him. For him. The reason that I put it there, it's actually a sonification of a teleportation circuit on the IBM Qiskit and also of a Grover circuit on the IBM Qiskit. It's similar.
I am inevitable.
It's a similar process to that found in the music that I talked about in 2 episodes previous, where it was the opening tune, and in the opening tune, the underlying drones that you hear are a sonification of a block sphere representation of in that case, a simple simulation. The drone that you hear under my speaking...
I am inevitable.
Okay, I'm going to stop the IBM Q14 for a bit because it's really winding me up, and I can't pause all the time like this because it's doing my head in, frankly. I will restart it when we actually get to the Avengers conversation, and then you can actually understand why it is doing all this noisy, strange stuff.
Stuff.
These underlying drones that you hear are a sonification what I call a cumulative sonification of the block sphere, looking at a Grover circuit and a teleportation circuit. And what it's doing is it's breaking down the circuit into slices, and it's looking at the output of each slice of that circuit on a block sphere and sonifying it. So it's that simple and that complicated. Before we get on to explaining how Thanos won the Endgame, I'm going to do a little bit of news reporting.
This is fake news, but of course, it's not. It's not. It's not.
There are two pieces of news or announcements that I would like to put forward today. The first is to announce the release of the new IBM Qiskit, or Qiskit, depending how you like to pronounce it. The Qiskit/Qiskit is an API, very powerful API, that allows you not only to connect to the IBM quantum computers online. This literally sounds like an advert. That not only allows you to connect to the IBM computers online, but also has a powerful simulator and a number of tools, and there are ways for accessing quantum chemistry algorithms, general quantum algorithms such as the Grover algorithm and the HHL algorithm, and many of the standard quantum elements, as well as new machine learning algorithms. I was at the IBM coding camp where they developed one of the new machine learning algorithms, and I was there when they won a prize, and I wasn't at all envious of the really cool headphones that they all got for creating this new quantum machine learning algorithm. Anyway, enough of my bitterness. Let's move on to the fact that what is particularly exciting for me about the new release of Qiskit, or Qiskit, is the Pulse API. Underlying all of the commands that you can use to program a quantum computer, these are compiled down to a number of pulses that happen on the actual quantum circuit. And you can now, to a degree, access these pulses directly and create your own pulses within the quantum circuit. So this is obviously a very powerful tool. Moving on, our second fake news item, but of course it's not fake news, is to inform you about two podcasts about quantum computing that you must avoid. Now, the reason you must avoid these will become clear as I continue to talk about them. So the first podcast that you must avoid is Meet the Mechanics, which is a sort of play on words of Meet the Mechanics, and it's discussions on quantum technology, available on iTunes and all of your favourite podcast providers. This podcast needs to be avoided because it is gonna, let's be frank, it has a level of technical depth and consistency and reliability and insight which frankly will put you off listening to my Quantum Computer Wrote a podcast. And seriously, that would be a bad idea. This podcast will change the way you think about the world, but you have to listen to every episode over an extended period of time. Built into it are very subtle viral sonic algorithms that will turn you into a superhuman. So the danger of listening to Meet the Mechanics is it is so much technically better than this podcast, it may draw you away from a potentially life-changing experience. Now, the Mechanics, it's actually hosted by Simon DeWitt, whose name I probably totally mispronounced, but he is actually a quantum hardware pioneer. It's gone past episode 50, and other reasons you should avoid it is you will find yourself highly attracted to the key figures that are interviewed, such as Jeremy O'Brien, Simon Benjamin, Austin Fowler, Lev Bishop, and Seth Lloyd, who I think is just great. So please, whatever you do not listen to that podcast. Do not subscribe to it. Do not give it a 5-star review on iTunes. Otherwise, you will find yourself drawn away from something very special. A second podcast that you must avoid that is about quantum computing And it could well kill you, actually, listening to this second podcast, because it uses a form of British humour that not only will draw you away from my podcast, because it's frankly so Spamalot, but also, or is it Spamalot or Hitchhikers? Well, the two have a sort of underlying genetic connection. The podcast is Stupid Qubit, and not only, as I say, will it draw you away from my quantum computer wrote a podcast, because they actually spend time planning and constructing their episodes, like proper amounts of time. It will also interfere with the sonic virus embedded in my quantum computer wrote a podcast, and instead of you becoming superhuman, you will actually become a supervillain. There's nothing I can do about this. Their algorithms are working on too deep a level for me to counteract them. So Stupid Qubit is quantum computing for the clueless with Jim Mortelman and Stuart Houghton. Do not subscribe to it on iTunes. Do not give it a 5-star review. Do not enjoy their interviews with some of the leaders in the field like Jerry Chow and Simon Benjamin from Oxford. Do not find the songs that they've actually created about quantum mechanics, which are actually pretty amusing, and the very British humour. Do not embed yourself in this. And especially if you don't have a lot of knowledge of quantum computer, you will find this podcast utterly addictive, so avoid it at all costs. Good. Well, I think I've performed a valuable service here. I am now going to move out of the fake news segment.
But of course, it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't.
Let us get back to the Avengers. With trepidation, I restart the IBM Melbourne Q14 quantum computer. So this is a 14-qubit quantum computer, and it is based in, well, if you can guess where the IBM Melbourne is based, then you will win a prize. I won't tell you what it is, but it will be a truly mind-blowing prize. Also, for a bonus, tell me who wrote Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. If you can send in those two answers and get them right, I will send you a prize beyond the reckoning of mortals, as Thor would say. Or would he? Does he ever say mortals anymore? Let's move on. Thanos won. How can you not see this? How can you not see this? Let's think about this logically, right? The way that I like to think about it, and I
am inevitable.
The way that it will keep on interrupting. I apologise, or I don't apologise. No, because I meant it to happen. The way that I think about this is that when Doctor Strange in the previous film, Avengers Infinity War, looked at Iron Man and said words to the effect, how do you do Benedict Cumberbatch doing an American accent? I don't even know where to begin. So I will just say that he said there is a...
Iron Man.
That there is a 1 in 14,504 chance of that happening, of the Avengers actually winning. A 1 in 14,504. He looked at all possible 14,504 possible evolutions from the point at the end of Avengers Infinity War, and he saw only one possibility, and it involved him giving away the stone, which really didn't do wonders for Iron Man's, Tony Stark's emotional and mental stability. Here's how I interpret that. I interpret that with another interpretation, that Doctor Strange in some sense is able...
I am inevitable.
Is able to look into the future and look through all the multiple worlds of quantum mechanical evolution, and to see that there's only one possible one that is going to create the possibility of Thanos not being inevitable. The probability of this particular thing happening is 0.07%, 1 in 14,504. So let me explain a little about the... Oh. let me explain a little about the many worlds interpretation. I think you probably heard the idea that quantum mechanics is probabilistic. So when I measure an electron's position, I will get a certain result, but it will only, as such, I can only know the probability of getting that result. So the chance of the electron...
I am inevitable.
Chance of the electron being halfway to the ceiling may be 50%. The chance of the electron being 3/4 of the way to the ceiling may be 25%. The chance of the electron being at the ceiling may be 1%, and so forth. And all of these add up to 100%. And that's the way it is with all of physics at the subatomic level. You can't say the electron is here. You can only say that when I measure the electron, there is a certain percentage chance that it will be here or there or in this other place. What does that mean? Because the problem is nobody can seem to get out of that dead end, that probabilistic dead end. Einstein was disgusted by it.
I am inevitable.
But it was absolutely inevitable, because every time people tried to show that there was some underlying thing going on in the electron, and that was creating the probabilities, this didn't seem to be the case. The electron was genuinely probabilistic. And worse than that, when you model the electron, when you actually write down the equations, they suggest the electron is in all those different positions between here and the ceiling.
I am inevitable.
Thus, we are in the situation where the very fundamental equations of reality say that an electron is in all possible positions at the same time until we measure it. And what does measuring mean? We don't really know. This has led to a great deal of philosophy. It's also led to how do we interpret this? We don't need to interpret the old version of physics. The old version of physics...
I am inevitable.
Said that what was happening is if an electron is halfway to the ceiling, we can see it and it'll still be halfway to the ceiling, and that is the electron's position. It's not in some weird combined position between me and the ceiling all at the same time. You don't...
I am inevitable.
You don't need to actually measure the electron. You know where it is. It knows where it is. It has a position. That's its position in reality. So there's no interpretation. That's how we see the world. When somebody walks across the road, we can see they're in the middle of the road, they're across the other side, they're at our side of the road, and that is their innate position. When something doesn't have an innate position, but is in all places at the same time until we do this weird thing called measuring it...
I am inevitable.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thanos is winding me up again. I'm going to have to... So I've now cut off the IBM Melbourne because I can't take any more of Thanos's inevitability. The issue is when we think an electron is in all places at the same time, we need some interpretation. What does that mean? We are human beings. We want to understand how things mean. Not everyone does. There's these Copenhagen interpretation people, physicists who say, don't think, calculate. That's not fair. They say, don't interpret, calculate. It doesn't matter what it means. All that matters is that it works. Fine, I'm happy with that. But how fascinating are some of the other interpretations? And a relatively popular interpretation, and is a mainstream interpretation, is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Now, what this says is that when we measure that electron, it's halfway towards the ceiling. The fact that before we measured it, it was in all other possible positions, what that kind of means is that all those positions were across different potential universes, different multiverses. Not different multiverses, but different parts of a multiverse. So we measure the electron, and we see that it's halfway towards my ceiling. Well, in fact, what's happening is in another universe, someone's measuring the electron and it's a quarter of the way to the ceiling. And then in another universe, someone's measuring the electron and it's 2/3 of the way to the ceiling. So what happens is it helps us to think about this electron. The electron isn't as such in multiple places all at the same time. What's happening is you have a multiverse for all of the electrons' possible measured positions. Each one has its own universe that triggers off as soon as you measure that position. And this, in very simplified and probably slightly scientifically inaccurate terms, is the many worlds interpretation. You've almost certainly come across it before. Now, believe it or not, for many people, that helps to clarify quantum mechanics. If you could see, I mean, I'm speaking both. I'm trying to speak in a way that people that don't understand the equations can also understand. If you could see those equations, you would be troubled. And if you could then see the attempts that have been made to show that those equations are somehow incomplete, but again and again, scientists have been rebuffed by the mathematics and an experiment which has shown them these equations are in some sense the lowest level equations. If you could kind of get that feeling that reality seems on the face of it to be about chance and tendency, then you would understand why the many worlds interpretation has become popular amongst some people. And in fact, David Deutsch, who I like to think of as the inventor of quantum computing, he certainly created the first quantum algorithm that he proved was faster than the classical equivalent. He finished his paper by saying, how can it be faster? And his explanation was, this supports that the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is correct. So what he believed is that the calculation was happening across, if you like, multiple universes, and that gave it the quantum speed up. Coming back now to Avengers Endgame. What we know, what Dr. Strange said, he said, I've looked at all 14,504 possible routes in the future, and only one of them leads to us succeeding. And he then does the unlikely thing of giving away the stone. Now, I interpret that as
now.
the quantum probability. I interpret that there is a one in that given all, and it's kind of, the truth is, if that was an accurate quantum probability, it would be a much higher number.
Now.
I interpret that as there are, from that point where Doctor Strange has that realization, there are 14,504 different worlds in the many worlds interpretation through which the future of the Avengers movies could have gone. 14 million different versions, 14,504. To me, let's think about that electron. Think. Suppose the electron that I was talking about, you put it into a quantum state that meant it was 99% certain to be halfway towards the ceiling. No, 99.99999% certain. Let's suppose there was only a 1 in 14,504 chance of that electron not being halfway towards the ceiling. So in other words, if you looked at it 14,504 times, you would find that it was 14 million, for 14,503 of those times, it would be halfway towards the ceiling. Well, there's lots of philosophical problems behind that. But the point is this: wouldn't you say that for all intents and purposes, that electron was halfway towards the ceiling? The fact there's a 1 in 14 million chance of it not being there really is meaningless. How it's a meaningless statistic, obviously not to Doctor Strange and the Avengers. So that electron is halfway towards the ceiling as far as I'm concerned. But wait a minute. 999. Thanos wins in 14,503 out of 14,504 universes. 9. Which says to me that in the same way the electron is definitely near as darn it definitely halfway up, Thanos won near as darn it definitely. In most universes, and to me, the many worlds interpretation says that all of those universes were generated from the point where Doctor Strange made that prediction. So all those universes happened and ran in parallel and spawned off new universes as well. But in all of them, apart from one spawning universe, the Avengers lose. And that says to me that Thanos has taken over the multiverse. Thanos has won. This is the reason that you have kept hearing the Thanos winning sample in the background and rarely heard the Iron Man. What is it he says? I am Iron Man. That I have to say, that bit in the movie, I liked it when Doctor Strange lifted his finger. Oh, by the way, I probably should have said spoilers. I probably should have said spoilers. I'll put it in the show notes, maybe, depending how nice I'm feeling. There is another universe, by the way, in which I did say spoilers at the beginning.
I am inevitable.
So I wanted to try and simulate this situation where what would it actually be like if you could create a multiverse, if you like, of Avengers scenarios, and only one of them was an Avengers win scenario, and the rest were all Thanos wins. Because as you know, as far as I'm concerned, Thanos has then won in the multiverse massively. Yeah, if Doctor Strange is right, Thanos has won massively.
I am inevitable.
Yeah, if Dr. Strange is right. The interesting thing is, with the IBM Q14 Melbourne, you can set up a multiverse. I mean, based on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And I set up a circuit, which is for quantum programmers an extremely simple circuit. Sometimes
I am inevitable.
it is the simplest circuits that illustrate the most profound truths in quantum mechanics and quantum computing. I set up a circuit with 14 Hadamard gates. Each of these Hadamard gates, when you put them in parallel like that across 14 qubits, you get a 14-bit superposition, essentially. It is the superposition of all numbers.
Iron Man.
Well, look at that, isn't it cute? The Avengers won for once. But when you set up this bunch of Hadamard gates on a quantum computer, you get a superposition of all numbers between 1 and 16,384. 1 and 16,384. So all 16,384 numbers are stored.
I am inevitable.
Are stored in the quantum computer. Of course, that sounds a bit odd because there's only 14 qubits. There's the 14 gates. But you can view the many worlds interpretation as being that those Hadamard gates are creating the potential for 16,384 universes in the multiverse.
Insert.
This is an insert. I have been put under extreme political and financial pressure to read you the following statement from the Society for the Insistence of Clear Language in Podcasting, SICLP. Dear Dr. Alexis Kirke, the last 10 minutes of this episode is littered with numbers scattered around in a seemingly random pattern, in a way that may be confusing or downright incomprehensible to the non-mathematical or non-quantum listener. Hence, we demand an insert designed to help turn something that is incomprehensible into something that is merely perplexing, as follows. I will now read out their demanded insert. Doctor Strange said there were 14,504 possible futures or universes, and only one of these in which the Avengers won. To create this many parallel universes using a quantum computer would require 24 qubits, which could, according to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, create just over 16 million parallel universes. Because Dr. Alexis Kirke has access only to a 14-qubit machine, the IBM Q Melbourne, he can create 16,384 universes only. When he observes the quantum computer output, it collapses to one of the 16,384 universes randomly. So he could have set it up so that whenever the quantum computer collapses / selects his chosen universe, brackets, chosen by him to be universe 1473, it would play the Iron Man winning sample, and in the other 16,383 out of 16,384 universes, it would play the Thanos winning sample. I don't see why they think this is more clear than my kind of off-the-cuff casting, but there you go. I'll carry on reading the letter. However, that would mean he'd have to record the podcast for about 17 years, 8 hours a day, to get a universe to occur where Iron Man and the Avengers win. So, he actually executes the quantum computer program 2,048 times, each time he sends it to the IBM Melbourne, i.e., he gets the Melbourne to create and collapse the 16,384 universes 2,048 times. And if one of those universes turns out to be his chosen universe, 1473, his computer triggers the Iron Man sample. Otherwise, it triggers Thanos. This is why Iron Man seems to come up so much in this podcast, even though Thanos speaks much more. I don't know who their writer is, but this really is terrible writing. I shall continue. It's almost finished, you'll be pleased to know. However, according to the number of samples triggered, podcast spoilers for the last 10 minutes after this, the Avengers win only 8 times in this podcast, while Thanos wins 27 times. And bear in mind that this is with Iron Man's chances of winning being increased firstly by 2,048 repeat runs on the quantum computer, and by the fact that the quantum computer has only 14 qubits, brackets, giving numbers between 1 and 16,384, close brackets, full stop. This increases the chance of the Avengers winning from 1 in 14,504 to 2,048 in 16,834. The Avengers are almost 2 million times more likely to win in this podcast than they are in the film. And yet, they still only win 8 times out of 35 in this recording. This will all be re-explained in the last 10 minutes of the podcast, much more slowly, but slightly back to front, and with the professionalism of a newt on Molly. Well, that's just rude. Last paragraph. To conclude our letter, Dr. Kirke, we at the Society for the Insistence of Clear Language in Podcasting, SICLP, would like to highlight that we do not like your podcast, do not like you, and will be placing great pressure upon iTunes to remove your podcast as a bad influence on the young. Yours sincerely, Danny Deutsch, SICLP. Okay, I have fulfilled my legal obligations by reading out that letter to you. This is the end of the insert.
Insert. Finish.
Oh, it's Iron Man.
And I am Iron Man.
Yes. So what I do, Iron Man's coming up quite a lot. I mean, not as much as Thanos, obviously, because it would have been impossible for me to record a podcast that was less than 17 years long that would have been able to have just one instance of Iron Man winning.
I am inevitable.
So what I've done is I've picked one number from the 16,384, if you like, parallel universes created within the IBM Q14, and that number is in fact is 1473. It's Nicholas Copernicus's birthday, actually.
I am Iron Man.
So what I do
is I set up the superposition, the multiple universes, if you like, of 16,384 numbers. I then observe I observe the superposition, and it all collapses to my universe and to one number.
I am inevitable.
And if the number that comes out is Nicholas Copernicus's birthday,
Nicholas Copernicus,
he kicked off the scientific revolution as far as I'm concerned, so it's like a long way back, helped us pave the ground for essentially believe the numbers, because of course quantum mechanics, if you didn't accept believe the numbers, you'd never accept those equations.
I am inevitable.
So the fact that quantum mechanics exists as a theory when it's so anti-intuitive is all thanks, I think, to that initial belief in Nicholas Copernicus and his saying that, believe the numbers, believe what's happening based on the observations, that, believe the numbers, believe the numbers. If that number 1473 comes out into my universe, 1473, then that's essentially Iron Man winning. I mean, it's not, because the chance of Iron Man winning, the chance of Avengers winning is 1 in 14 million.
I am inevitable.
Is 1 in 14,504. But I'm not waiting. I mean, what would that be? That would probably, I don't think I'd be able to live long enough to record a podcast long enough for that to come up. And it would require a 24 qubit quantum computer to set up a large enough superposition of Hadamard gates to give, and that would be about a 1 in 16 million chance, and that's the closest that you could do to simulate the Avengers. I don't have a 26 qubit quantum computer.
I am inevitable.
Nor do I have multiple lifetimes in which it's a 24 qubit quantum computer, by the way. Nor do I have multiple lifetimes over which to record the podcast so that we could have that one instance. So I shrunk it down to 1 in 16,384 chance of our universe being the one where the Avengers win. And that was using the 14 qubits, which gives you the 1 in 16,384
I am inevitable.
of getting 1473, Copernicus's birthday. But here's the thing, even that, if I recorded 8 hours a day for 17 years, I'd still only get one instance on average where the Avengers won. 9. So I've taken that 1 in 14 million chance, I've multiplied it by over 800 to make it over 800 times more likely.
I am Iron Man.
Multiplied it by over 800 times to make it more likely that Iron Man does that. And even then, it would multiply it by over 800 times. Dividing that 14 million by 850, it would still then
I am inevitable.
take me 17 years of 8 hours recording a day. I'm not willing to do that. I have other things I need to do in my life. So I've divided it again. What I do is I create those 16,384 universes 2,048 times. 16,384 universes 2,048 times. You can do that when you send a program to the IBM Q14 Melbourne, you can say run this program 2,048 times or any number of times.
I am inevitable.
And
if in that 2048 times that I run the Hadamard program, 2048 times, just once Nicholas Copernicus's birthday comes out, then I say the Avengers have won, and that's when you hear the recording of Tony Stark. Otherwise, you hear the recording of Thanos, and these are both triggered by the quantum computer. So let's just...
I am inevitable.
Now, I think you realise that if I'd have left that bloody program running for the whole podcast, which it kind of feels like I did, but I didn't, you'd just hear Thanos, 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 and the occasional Iron Man. And that
Thanos, 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 Thanos.
outcome is...
Thanos, 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 Thanos.
almost 2 million times more likely that the
I am inevitable.
the chances of Iron Man winning, of the Avengers winning, in my quantum multiverse, where I run the 16,384 multiverses 2,048 times, is almost 2 million times more likely the Avengers will win using that simulation. 2 million times. And yet, how many times have you heard Iron Man say he's won? It's not many. It's not many at all. So...
I am Iron Man.
if you can imagine, almost 2 million times more likely the Avengers will win using that simulation, that Iron Man recording happened 2 million times less frequently than the Thanos one, then you would have some idea of how much Thanos dominates the multiverse in Avengers Endgame.
I am inevitable.
And that, ladies and jelly babies, is why Thanos won in Avengers Endgame. Thank you very much.